You need to check this out. Recent AI advancements have gotten kind of scary. ChatGPT can write your research papers for you, art can be produced at the click of a button, tech jobs are being replaced left and right by literal robots. While legislature is still very much being determined as to how we can use artificial intervention, in the meantime, I say, we lean in and learn how to use it to our advantage. Lucky for you, because of it, learning a language has literally never been easier. In case you live under a rock or you haven't heard of ChatGPT, as I have mentioned previously, it's an artificial intelligence chatbot which is trained to follow your every instruction. And while I can't tell you that you look nice in the outfit you're wearing, it can improve your study skills if you know how to use it. Here are some ways AI will help you study better. So this new software can help you in numerous ways that I can't sit here and explain to you. But since I like languages, here's some ways I've adopted it into my language learning. Now, if you're anything like me, maybe you need to start with a direction. That's why classes worked so well with me, because I had the agenda laid out for me. I had the due date, I had the grades, I had the reflections, and I had the feedback from my teachers. And that felt very like da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Now, if I'm studying on my own, I don't necessarily have that, or I have to make it for myself. And that's where I struggle, because I can find exercises to do online, but they might not be engaging, and I might have a hard time reproducing that and using what I learned in my own speaking and practice, in my own writing practice, etc., etc. ChatGPT can essentially act as your language planner for you. Now, I have been wanting to speak Russian for a very long time. I started a while back, and then I kind of let it slide, and then started again, and then let it slide again. I'm kind of at that A1 plus. I know the alphabet, I know a couple words, couple phrases, I can say very basic sentences in the present indicative, but I'm having a very hard time finding an A1 level course or A1 level textbook where I don't need to waste my time and energy reviewing what I already know, and I can instead just build off of what I already have. That can be really hard because there is no textbook that's made for just me and my experiences. Enter ChatGPT. So I want to start building my schedule, right? My goal is to make it into that A2CEFR level. I just don't know how to do that. So I went to ChatGPT and I typed in this command. I want to learn Russian, but I don't know how to start. I want you to review the best free methods to learn a new language, and I want you to design a weekly schedule for me to begin learning Russian. I want to spend 6 hours a week learning Russian, and I want to practice reading, listening, and writing. Please plan specific activities and how long I should spend on them each week so that I can learn as quickly and effectively as possible. And here's what ChatGPT had to say. Learning a new language can be an exciting and rewarding journey. Thank you, ChatGPT. To help you get started with learning Russian, I'll review some of the best free methods available to design a weekly schedule for you to follow. Remember, consistency and practice are key to language learning success. Robots do have feelings. Putting that aside, I was very kind. Not only did it create an agenda for me, it gave me online resources. And now none of these are, groundbreaking. It spat back things like Duolingo, Memrise, Closemaster, things I was already aware of. But not everyone always is. They also talked about language exchange apps like Tandem and HelloTalk. I did not know about this one, Speaky. I've never heard of that. I'll look into it now. It also recommended things like YouTube channels and podcasts. And naturally, it didn't get into specifics, but if you wanted it to, all you have to do is type the message, what are specific YouTube channels dedicated to help me learn Russian? It'll tell you. And then below all that, it came up with a weekly agenda, and this is what it came up with. So it blocked it into 30-minute segments for 3 segments a day, and it basically said you'll be studying pretty in depth for 6 of those days, and then on the 7th day you will simply review. And I have to say, that sounds pretty good to me. That sounds like a plan that I would honestly love to follow. The thing about making these plans is I get very excited. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna study for 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, and I'm gonna do this, that, and the other thing. And I get really excited and I plan it all out. And then I do maybe a day and I'm like, oh wait, this is hard. It's always the planning that's easier than the doing. So what I like about this is that it has essentially reviewed all of the knowledge from the internet, which is a lot of knowledge, and given me the best possible plan to start with. So moving on over to my trusty Notion page, I have decided to start anew because the last one I've been building for a number of years. It doesn't really reflect the vibe I'm going for. It's cluttered and I don't like looking at it. So I'm starting over, and the one that I have up now is modeled after Anna Linkskova. Links. I will link her page here. Feel free to go purchase one of her Notion templates. It's the most in-depth, comprehensive page I've seen. So go support her, she's awesome. But anyways, so I have this. Taken what I've just learned from ChatGPT, I have now put that into my own agenda. So when I hit the agenda button, this is what I see. I have put all the things that ChatGPT mentioned, and just to skip over that so you don't have to sit here and watch me type. I've already put that into my daily things to do, my daily to-do list, if you will. The way this works, I think it's interesting. Feel free to skip ahead if you don't. After a new week, I'll hit this new weekly agenda. This will pop up, all of this, minus, of course, the inputted information. What I do is I do week 1, the month, which is June 19. Okay. So obviously this is for Monday, this is for Tuesday. You get the gist, it's an agenda. So what I like to do for agendas is have the thing that I absolutely have to get done at the top. That's pretty self-explanatory. I'll have a divider, and then all of the more minute activities, all of the lesser things I'll have underneath that. And then if I have anything going on that day for calendar, any events, I'll put that as a bullet point below. So let's say I've done 30 minutes of Pimsleur and I signed up for an exchange program and learned a couple of phrases. So what I would do is I'd consider that maybe vocabulary. So I'd go over to this table here. This is grammar, this is vocabulary. I did vocabulary for the day. Maybe I was really, really inspired to go ahead and do some writing. So I'll do some writing. And these represent 30-minute slots, as ChatGPT explained to me. So having checked that off, I have now completed 67% of my goal for that day. Cool, I've done an hour. I only have to do a half hour more. Say I get really inspired, I do grammar, I also do reading. Oh, I've gone above and beyond. It'll already tell me that. Let's say for the next day, I have a little bit more to do, so I only do some writing. And then naturally, as you go through the week, you'll check off, and it'll tell you what percentage of your daily goal you've met. Now, going down here to language learning goals, I have outlined the languages I'm currently learning, their importance to me at this moment, as well as the hours each week I want to spend on them, the things I want to focus on, and just to be cute, I had this little visual in case it wasn't clear by the hours. I'm extra. You don't need to do that if you don't want to. One thing that I've done that I'm really proud of is, so I have this table, I've checked off a number of boxes. I did 133% of my goal the first day and only 33% of the second day. What that will do is show me which areas I focused on that week. So I did, of the first 2 days only, I did a full hour of writing, half hour of reading, half hour of vocab, and going through the week, I check off more boxes. That will be represented here. So theoretically, I'm done with the week, right? What I'm going to do is I'll highlight this, put all of it in my archive. For what reason? I don't know, just in case I want to go back and review. And then I will go ahead and click this new weekly agenda, let it load a bit, and it will come right back up. Now, obviously I have to change this, I have to change this, I have to input what I want to do that week, and then I will again have to configure that to this below, to this one below. But when I do, after several weeks, it will tell me how much of one thing I did over the course of the time, and I can see, the sum would be an hour. Naturally, I'm not going to do this right now. I'm not going to configure that and let you sit here and watch. But it'll be interesting after a month or so to see which ones I gravitate towards the most. Naturally, it's harder to find a speaking partner, especially at such an early stage in my learning. But again, ChatGPT can help with that. Right? You can really see which ones you tend to focus on the most and which ones you might want a little bit more time with. And really, it didn't take me that long at all to come up with this, just a little bit of extra research. So, on to the next thing that ChatGPT can do for you. I have a hard time correcting myself on things. I know people who speak the languages I want to learn, but asking some random person to look at my homework just because they speak French or just because they speak Russian feels kind of, I don't know. That feels weird to me. My preference would be someone who knows my history with learning that language to look over my work and say, oh, maybe you meant to say this, or actually this is the wrong conjugation here. So in that way, AI can be your best buddy, because there's no judgments. Robots don't have feelings.
Robots do have feelings.
Going back to my landing page, I go to journals. Ignore for a second the Diary of Wimpy Kid vocab, you didn't see it. A writing exercise that I did, which I thought was extremely helpful to me, is I went online, I found an article on Deutsche Welle for German, naturally. It's about fangirls and like K-pop and all that kind of stuff. I thought it was really interesting. Before even like really trying to read it and understand what was going on, what I did is at first I just skimmed through the text and found any vocabulary word that I didn't know beforehand. And I didn't even, again, not even trying to understand what I'm reading, I just went ahead and put them all over here. Now that I have a list of things that I know I'm going to see, not quite familiar with, but they're not gonna be thrown at me, you know what I mean? I went down here, made a table, found that phrase, and translated it to English using pawns.eu, which I happen to like a lot. It's almost a little too comprehensive. Like, you put any word in there, it'll give you like 6 or 7 different meanings, and that can be a little overwhelming. Is there such thing as too much information? Yes there is, but that's not what we're talking about right now. So again, now these words aren't going to be thrown at me from left field. There's a lot of stipulation as to whether you should translate directly into your mother language or not, if that's even helpful, because when you think about it, it does create a little middleman, a little extra step there, whereas if you were trying to define it in its own language, then maybe you can kind of get more of the nuances that could be missing in your own language, or vice versa. I did that just for time's sake. If I'm seeing a new word for the very first time, I find it easier to connect it to my mother tongue, which is English, especially a word like besessen. That sounds very, very similar to the English obsessed, or possessed even. I would actually go too far as to theorize that the English probably came out of this word somehow along history. That's pure stipulation. I don't know if that's true. But now I won't forget it in my head. So I've done this work. I'm going to try my hardest not to look back at this table, to keep in mind on this side all these words I have just learned and just researched. I will use as many of them as I can in my own writing. Because once you put those words into context, I've said this so many times on so many different videos, but no, once you put those words into context, it stops being a translation of the English word and starts being more of that word in its living context, which is German in this case. In terms of what I wrote, as you can see, it was really just a couple of short paragraphs, my opinions as to the subject matter, my questions, if there was anything I found interesting or shocking even, I wrote about that very briefly. It doesn't have to be a long thing. You just want to get your mind in that mode. Now, what does this have to do with ChatGPT? I just went on for like 6 minutes telling you about this writing exercise that I did. What I then did is went to ChatGPT. I put in the command, I want you to read these, I wrote this badly in English. I want you to read these German paragraphs, check the grammar, and find the errors and correct them. And then I copied and pasted my paragraph. And then it spat back out my writing with corrections. And then I, put that back in here. I kind of compared the two and see where I differed from the corrected version. Here's the key here, the declension, spelling mistakes, and then wrong word or phrase. And so as you can see, not as many mistakes as I thought, which is really exciting. And I feel like if I do this enough, it'll come more fluidly. You can even ask ChatGPT to explain something. Now, I will say with ChatGPT, you have to keep in mind that it is a robot. It won't catch the nuances of languages that humans catch. And that's partially why I'm not really afraid of it taking my job as a translator or as somebody who's simply interested in languages. I'm not really worried that AI is going to eliminate the interest in learning, which is what I'm interested in. We already have Google Translate. We already have apps where you can speak into it and it'll speak words out in another language. That's great, but often it gets it wrong. And look, it's only going to get better. But really, I'm not worried about it. I say we lean in, use it to our advantage, and continue to have these hobbies, continue to have these interests and nurture them and learn for the sake of learning. For example, this essentially, I meant to say, one has to fight it. And it translated that, or it fixed that to one has to understand it. And that is far from what I was trying to say. So again, it's easy to see where it kind of comes short, but that's just another reason. It keeps you on your toes. It's another reason to pay attention. Using AI in your learning can actually be invaluable, especially if you learn on your own or if you need something clarified. Really, it can be helpful if you aren't afraid to use it. Another hardship about learning a language on your own is you don't get as much speaking practice, or at least it's really difficult to find sometimes. While I can't verbalize my thoughts to ChatGPT, I can do the next best thing. I can essentially use it as a language exchange partner. I go to ChatGPT and I typed in this response. I want you to act as a language partner. You'll start a conversation with me about films in French. Obviously, it can be any topic in any language that you're interested in. I just chose that. In every response, you should provide your opinion and then ask me a question to keep the conversation going. And this is what ChatGPT says to that response. So right off the bat, it uses French in its response, as I asked it to, in a pretty high or possibly native level. It gave me a rather animated response for a robot, spooky, and then it asked me a question, again, as I wanted it to.
Bien sûr, je serais ravie de parler des films en français avec vous. Les films sont une passion pour beaucoup de gens, y compris moi. Quel est votre genre de film préféré? Et est-ce qu'il y a un film récent que vous avez vraiment apprécié?
So I've come up with my response.
J'aime bien l'horreur. J'ai regardé le film Grave en film français et c'était vraiment comme rien d'autre. Quel genre de film appréciez-vous le plus?
And it's amazing because it really does feel like you're talking to a human being, which is spooky. I'm not gonna get into that right now. I'm just gonna use it to my advantage, okay? And just put all that other stuff out of my mind. As you can see, this can go on forever. And you're not getting that verbal speaking with somebody. But when you go through and you read to yourself, even just the responses you get, you can hear in your accent what is needing more improvement and what you're doing better at. For me, I have not spoken French in a long time. I read it a lot. I write it a lot. I don't speak it much. And even just reading it to you now, I can hear that I was stumbling a little bit. So now I can note that off and say, okay, I clearly need to speak the words more often so that they come more naturally, more fluently. And of course, it's always better to find somebody, like a human being, to speak with so you can hear that language in action and get, the slang and get the rhythm for how people genuinely speak. But when you don't have access to someone like that, when you don't have the funds to purchase hours for a tutor or whatever the situation is, this is a free alternative. Admittedly, not getting speaking in, unless you speak to yourself like I do all the time. So for my last tip, and maybe one of the simplest, most interesting things you can use ChatGPT for, is reading. I know that I'm caught in this really awkward stage in my German learning where I don't want to read kids' books because I'm not a child, but adult texts, while possibly interesting, seem to go over my head. And I can't seem to find a book that is catered to language learners that don't have the German text on one side of the page and English on the other. I can't stand that. It doesn't work for my learning skills. I jump back and forth between pages and then suddenly I'm not even trying to comprehend what I'm reading, but I'm searching for vocabulary. That's not the point of my reading exercise. Going back on over to ChatGPT, My prompt was, please write me a simple story using B1 level German vocabulary. This is what it gives me. Now, this is, at least a page and a half of text. It's the perfect length because in English and French, I like to read long books. I like to get into it. I like to learn about the characters, the world. I like all that stuff. But I'm not quite there with my German yet. So an attempt to use baby steps, maybe I can search for texts that are a little bit on the shorter side. Currently, I'm at the point where news articles are starting to click for me. I'll do things like find a YouTube video in German, usually of a news source where I can understand their slow spoken German, and then I'll go through and read the comments. Because now I've been introduced to the topic and I have the vocabulary to understand then even native level German. If it's only a sentence or two, I can usually piece together what they're talking about. Now, if I want something more academic, really to engage my brain, to build up that kind of interest in longer text, to slowly, build that up, this is a perfect way to do that. I've been given about, recently a page and a half worth of text. It seems to be like a really rather boring story, but hey, for a page and a half, I'll read whatever you throw at me. Now, glancing over it, I'm not seeing any words that are new to me, so maybe I can ask it to throw in a little bit more vocabulary. So what I've just done is edited my original prompt, asked it to come up with something a little bit more high level. I don't know how to describe it. It looks like it's giving me a very similarly structured story, and I'm seeing more words that are more at my level. So what I really like about ChatGPT is, again, you can go back and edit your response if it's not working for you. You can regenerate your response if that's not working for you. You can ask it to be more specific. You can ask it to do anything, really. And what I would do with this text is something rather more similar to the other article that I have already explained to you, where I'd go through, I'd search for the vocabulary, put that into a table, maybe try to piece through what that means, and then go back and form my own opinions about the text, my own questions, trying to use the vocab, in my own way. So yeah, it's really a crazy world out there. Things are changing. People are less people-y. Art and humanities are becoming less human, but we can worry about that down the line, I'm sure the Oppenheimer movie is going to put in a new perspective on humanness and what it means to be living. That's not where I wanted to go for this video anyways. I hope that this has been interesting and educational for you. I hope that it has given you a couple more ideas as to how you can improve your learning, how you can get started on those summer plans for learning that language. ChatGPT can also recommend books to you. It can also do this. It can plan your trips to wherever. It feels limitless, which again, not interested in getting into the spooky side of that. We're not gonna think about it right now. We're just gonna bask in the language learning opportunities. Love you, bye.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.